Mom, stop pretending you can live alone. By summer we'll have the papers signed. And this house will finally be ours. My children think I'm losing my mind. They want my house. They think I won't fight back. They're wrong. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. I was making cinnamon rolls when my phone told me the truth. 66 years old, widow for 3 years, still standing in my own kitchen. The mixer hummed. Butter and cinnamon swirled together like they had 1,000 times before. My phone buzzed against the counter. Face down. Always face down now. I touched it with my flour-dusted finger. The screen lit up. A voicemail. From Bethany, my daughter. I pressed play. Her voice filled my kitchen. Cold. Clinical. The voice she uses at the hospital when patients are dying. She was talking to someone. Not to me. About me. Grant's voice joined hers. My son-in-law. The wealth manager with soft hands and hard eyes. Then Lucas. My son. My baby who used to cry when butterflies landed on flowers. They thought they were talking privately. They thought I wouldn't hear. They were planning my future. Without me in it. The mixer kept humming. I turned it off. The kitchen fell silent except for the clock. Tick, tick, tick. Bethany's words echoed in my head. Temporary guardianship. List the house by June. Mom won't fight it. She never fights. I replayed the message. Once. Twice. 3 times. Each time, their voices grew colder. Each time, my heart grew quieter. Jonah always said money makes weather in families. Sometimes gentle rain. Sometimes hurricanes. He built me a barometer for storms like this. A plan. A way to measure when the pressure drops too low. I wiped my hands on my apron. Flour fell to the floor like snow. The white powder scattered across the blue tiles. 40 years of making breakfast in this kitchen. 40 years of sweeping flour from these same tiles. Now my own children wanted to sweep me away too. My fingers found the contact labeled continuity. Priya Desai, attorney, friend, the keeper of Jonah's careful preparations. She answered on the second ring. Her voice was warm, real. I told her it was time. Time to trigger Jonah's continuity provisions. Time to stop pretending everything was fine. She understood. She always understood. She said she would call Omar too. The digital expert. The one who catches lies in computer files. I told her to tell Omar to bring a storm jacket. We were in for weather. After I hung up, I stood in my kitchen. Really stood. Feet planted. Spine straight. This kitchen had seen everything. Birthday cakes rising in the oven. Thanksgiving turkeys browning to gold. Late-night snacks for teenagers who thought they were starving. It had seen Jonah's last breakfast. Coffee black. Toast barely brown. His hand shaking as he buttered the edges. It had seen me learn to cook for one. Smaller portions. Quieter meals. The radio playing old songs to fill the empty spaces. Now it would see me fight back. The cinnamon rolls were still rising in their pan. Patient. Waiting for heat to transform them. I looked at the photograph on my windowsill. Jonah on the pier. Sun in his beard. Eyes laughing at Atlantic wind. He died of a sensible heart that quit without drama. But before he went, he prepared. Plan for storms, Eve. They don't ask permission. He made lists in his careful handwriting. Phone numbers. Account numbers. Instructions for when the weather turned bad. He knew families could become hurricanes. He knew love could turn into something else entirely. I slid the rolls into the oven. Set the timer for 25 minutes. The oven hummed to life. Heat began to rise. The kitchen filled with the smell of butter and cinnamon and possibility. When that bell rang, my old life would be over. My new life would begin. The children thought I would go quietly. Thought I would pack my memories into boxes and disappear into some pastel hallway. They thought I would shuffle down carpeted corridors, eat meals from plastic trays, watch television programs chosen by strangers. They thought I would become invisible. A problem solved. A burden lifted. They thought wrong. I was a librarian for 40 years. I know how stories end. The quiet ones. The overlooked ones. The ones who seem too small to matter. Sometimes they're the most dangerous. Libraries taught me about patience. About watching. About waiting for the right moment to act. They taught me that the smallest books sometimes hold the biggest secrets. That whispered words can topple kingdoms. That old women with reading glasses see everything. I cleaned the mixer bowl. Wiped the counter. Put everything back in its place. Order. That's what libraries taught me. Everything has its place. Everything serves its purpose. Even little old ladies with flour on their hands. The oven hummed. The timer ticked down. The storm gathered outside my windows. Rain began to tap against the glass. Soft at first, then harder, like fingers drumming on a table. Like impatience made audible. But inside my kitchen, everything was exactly where it belonged. The salt and pepper shakers Jonah bought me for our first anniversary. The wooden spoons worn smooth by decades of stirring. The recipe box with his mother's handwriting faded but still readable. Including me. I was still here. Still standing. Still deciding my own story. The phone buzzed again. Another message from Bethany. Something about doctor appointments and safety evaluations. I didn't listen. Not yet. Instead, I opened my recipe box. Found the card for Jonah's favorite cookies. The ones I made when he was building his careful plans. Molasses cookies. Dark and rich and impossible to break. When the cinnamon rolls finished baking, I would start a new batch. Something sweet for the storm. Something to remind me that I still knew how to make things rise. The timer had 18 minutes left. 18 minutes to remember who I used to be. Who I still was underneath the widow's clothes and the careful politeness. 18 minutes to become dangerous. I pulled out the molasses. The brown sugar. The spices that would bite back. Outside, the storm was gathering strength. Inside, so was I. Priya came first. Her car pulled into my driveway at 3 o'clock. Rain still clung to her dark hair. She carried a leather folder like a shield. I opened the door before she knocked. Some habits from 40 years of anticipating needs. She stepped into my hallway. Shook the rain from her coat. Looked at me with eyes that had seen too many families tear themselves apart. Priya had been Jonah's choice. Not mine originally. But widowhood teaches you to trust your husband's judgments. Especially the careful ones. She set the folder on my kitchen table. The same table where I'd heard my children planning my erasure. The folder was thick. Heavy with papers and possibilities. Priya explained what Jonah had built for me. A continuity plan. Assets that could disappear into a foundation. Money that could hide from greedy hands. I listened. Nodded. Understood that my dead husband was still protecting me. The Heart Community Fund. That's what he'd called it. A name that sounded generous but felt like armor. Everything I owned could transfer into it within hours. The house. The accounts. The small investments that had grown quietly for decades. Still mine to control, but invisible to people who wanted to take control from me. Omar arrived while Priya was explaining signatures and trustees. He looked younger than I expected. Cheerful face. Bright eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He carried a canvas bag that seemed too small for saving someone's life. But Omar had been Jonah's friend since college. Engineering school had bonded them. Trust had kept them close. Omar unpacked his tools like a surgeon preparing for operation. Laptop. Cables. Devices I couldn't name but somehow recognized as weapons. He would mirror my devices. Copy everything. Create proof of what my children had done. what they planned to do. I made coffee while he worked. The ritual steadied my hands, gave me something ordinary to hold on to. The coffee maker gurgled. Steam rose from the pot. The kitchen filled with the smell of morning routines and normal days. But nothing about this day was normal. Omar found things. Digital footprints. Electronic breadcrumbs my children had left behind. They'd accessed my email account. Read messages meant only for me. Learned things they had no right to know. Grant's computer had been busy. Creating documents. Forging signatures. Building a case against my competence. A fake medical evaluation, made to look official. Designed to prove I couldn't live alone. Dr. Kessler's name was on it. But Dr. Kessler hadn't written it. The metadata told a different story. Grant's computer. Grant's printer. Grant's lies. Omar showed me the evidence on his screen. Numbers and codes that looked like gibberish but spelled out betrayal. The document was created at 1:13 in the morning. On a Tuesday. 3 days ago. While I was sleeping in my own bed. Dreaming innocent dreams. My son-in-law was downstairs crafting my destruction. The notary stamp was fake too. Borrowed from someone who'd moved away. Someone who couldn't verify or deny what she'd supposedly witnessed. Sloppy work. Desperate work. The kind of mistakes people make when greed overwhelms caution. I poured coffee into 3 cups. Added cream to mine. Left theirs black. Priya sipped hers and watched me process what I'd learned. Omar typed commands that made his screen dance with information. I felt strangely calm. Like standing in the eye of a hurricane. Everything spinning around me. Nothing touching me yet. This was what Jonah had prepared me for. Not the specific betrayal, but the possibility of it. He'd known that grief makes people vulnerable. That money makes families dangerous. That love can curdle into something unrecognizable. Priya asked what I wanted to do next. Whether I was ready to activate the plan. I looked around my kitchen. At the canisters lined up by height. At the dish rag folded just so. At the photograph of Jonah laughing at the wind. This was my home. These were my choices. This was my life. I told her yes. Trigger everything. Move the assets. Build the walls. Make myself untouchable. Omar grinned like he'd been waiting for permission to start a war. Priya opened her phone and started making calls. Bank presidents. Investment managers. People who owed Jonah favors and remembered his widow fondly. I watched them work on my behalf. 2 people I barely knew. Fighting for someone they barely understood. But Jonah had chosen them. And Jonah had chosen well. Within an hour, my financial life had rearranged itself. Money moved through electronic channels. Titles transferred to new holders. Assets disappeared into legal structures designed to protect rather than profit. The house was still mine to live in. But it belonged to the foundation now. Anyone wanting to sell it would need my signature and the foundation's approval. Good luck getting both. My bank accounts had become foundation accounts. My investments had become foundation investments. My future had become foundation business. Still mine, but legally complicated enough to discourage theft. Omar finished setting his traps. Digital snares for anyone trying to access my information. Electronic alarms for anyone forging my signatures. If my children tried to steal from me again, he would know. He would have proof. He would catch them in the act. Priya gathered her papers. Omar packed his tools. Both of them looked satisfied with the afternoon's work. I walked them to the door. Thanked them for services I hoped I'd never need again. But I knew better. This was just the beginning. The first move in a game my children had started without asking if I wanted to play. After they left, I stood in my quiet kitchen. The coffee cups sat in the sink. The folder lay closed on the table. Everything looked the same. Nothing was the same. I was still Evelyn Hart. Still a widow. Still 66 years old. Still standing in my own kitchen. But I was no longer defenseless. No longer naive. No longer willing to pretend that love conquers all. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it loses. Sometimes it needs help. Today, help had come. Tomorrow, the real test would begin. I rinsed the coffee cups. Folded the dish rag. Put everything back in its place. Outside, the rain had stopped. The storm was moving on. But I could still feel the pressure in the air. More weather was coming. Saturday arrived with sunshine and lies. Bethany came first. She always comes first when trouble needs a gentle face. I watched her park from my kitchen window. Saw her check her makeup in the rearview mirror. Saw her practice her smile. She carried flowers, daisies, white and yellow and completely wrong. I've been allergic to daisies for 20 years. Bethany knows this. She's a nurse. But today she forgot. Or pretended to forget. Memory can be selective when it serves a purpose. I opened the door before she knocked. Some habits never change. Her smile was bright as fresh paint, covering whatever lay underneath. She hugged me like I was fragile. Like I might break if she squeezed too hard. The daisies pressed against my chest. Already my nose began to itch. Grant arrived 10 minutes later. He carried a casserole dish wrapped in foil. The kind neighbors bring when someone dies. His smile matched Bethany's. Practiced. Perfect. Completely hollow. Lucas came last. He's always late. Always apologetic. Always looking for the easy way out. His keys jingled as he locked his car. The sound carried through my open windows. 3 sets of footsteps on my front porch. 3 faces wearing masks of concern. 3 people who wanted to erase me from my own story. I made tea while they arranged themselves in my living room. The ritual gave me time to think. My hands were steady as I poured the water. Steam rose from the cups like morning fog. I set the tray on the coffee table Jonah built from salvaged wood. Everything in this room had history. Everything had earned its place. Unlike my visitors, Bethany started the performance. She asked about my medication routine. What bills I'd forgotten to pay. Whether I'd missed any appointments. I answered each question simply. Truthfully. Without giving them what they wanted. What medication? I take vitamins. What forgotten bills? I pay everything online. Automatically. On schedule. What missed appointments? My calendar is color-coded and up to date. Their faces shifted slightly. The script wasn't working as planned. Grant tried a different approach. He spoke about quality of life. About safety. About the comfort of professional care. He described a place called Willowmere. Chef-prepared meals. Art classes. On-site medical staff. Everything I could want. Except the one thing that mattered. Freedom. I listened without interrupting. Nodded at appropriate moments. Sipped my tea and watched their faces. Lucas fidgeted with his phone. Bethany twisted her wedding ring. Grant's smile never wavered. They were nervous. Good. They should be. When Grant finished his sales pitch, I set down my cup. The china clinked against the saucer. A small sound, but it felt like punctuation. Like the period at the end of a sentence. I told them I understood their concerns. That I appreciated their thoughtfulness. That I would consider their suggestions. All lies. But polite lies. The kind that keep conversations civil. Grant leaned forward. His eyes brightened like he smelled victory. He mentioned that Bethany had scheduled a follow-up appointment with Dr. Kessler. Monday morning. Just to be safe. Just to be safe. As if safety lived in medical offices and evaluation forms. I nodded again. Said that sounded reasonable. Said I looked forward to it. More lies. But necessary ones. They stayed for another hour. Ate my cookies. Drank my tea. Pretended we were a normal family having a normal conversation. But nothing about this was normal. When they finally left, Grant lingered at the door. He turned back with that practiced smile. He told me I could trust him. That he handled these situations for families all the time. He was right about that. He did handle these situations. He handled them like a butcher handles meat. After the door closed, I stood in my hallway. The house felt different, contaminated, like smoke from a distant fire had drifted through my windows. I carried the daisy bouquet to the kitchen sink, dropped it in the garbage disposal, turned on the water and let it wash away. The grinding sound was satisfying. Final. My phone buzzed while I was washing the teacups. A message from Omar. He'd caught them, all of them. Their digital fingerprints were all over his traps. The fake medical evaluation was already written, saved on Grant's computer, ready to be submitted on Monday. Dr. Kessler's signature, forged. Dr. Kessler's letterhead, stolen. Dr. Kessler's reputation, about to be destroyed. The document claimed I had moderate cognitive impairment, that I couldn't live safely alone, that I needed immediate intervention. All lies, but official-looking lies, the kind that fool judges and social workers. Omar had screenshots, timestamps, metadata that told the real story. Grant had written the evaluation at 1:30 in the morning, on his home computer, using his home printer, with his clumsy criminal hands. The notary stamp belonged to someone who'd moved to Arizona, someone who couldn't verify what she'd supposedly witnessed. Sloppy work, desperate work, the kind that unravels quickly under scrutiny. I deleted Omar's message after reading it twice. Some information was too dangerous to keep. But I remembered every word, every detail, every piece of evidence that would save me. The afternoon light slanted through my kitchen windows, golden and warm and completely ordinary. But I wasn't ordinary anymore. I was a woman with weapons. Hidden weapons. Sharp-edged truths waiting to cut. I made dinner for myself. A simple meal. Soup and bread and butter. I ate slowly. Tasted everything. Noticed textures and temperatures and flavors. This might be my last quiet meal in this kitchen. Tomorrow the war would begin in earnest. But tonight, I was still just Evelyn Hart. Still a widow. Still 66 years old. Still eating soup at her own table. The phone rang while I was washing dishes. Bethany's number flashed on the screen. I let it ring. Once. Twice. 3 times. 4. On the 5th ring, I answered. Her voice was different now. Sharper. Less practiced. More desperate. She asked if I was feeling confused. If I was having trouble remembering things. If I needed help. I told her I was fine. That my memory was excellent. That I remembered everything. Everything. Including conversations they thought I hadn't heard. Including plans they thought I couldn't stop. There was silence on the other end. Then breathing. Then nothing. She'd hung up. I finished the dishes. Dried them. Put them away in their proper places. Order. That's what would save me. Order and preparation and the kind of patience librarians learn. Tomorrow would bring chaos. But tonight, everything was exactly where it belonged. Tuesday morning brought the tour of my future cage. Willowmere assisted living sat like a wedding cake on manicured lawns. White columns. Soft lighting. Smiles painted on every face. Bethany drove. Her hands gripped the steering wheel too tightly. She'd barely spoken since picking me up. Lucas met us in the parking lot. He looked tired, guilty, like a man who'd sold something he couldn't afford to lose. Grant appeared from nowhere. He always appears when money is being discussed. His smile was wider today. Confidence suited him, or so he thought. A woman in peach scrubs greeted us at the entrance. She knew my name before I gave it. Welcome, Evelyn. We've been expecting you. Expecting me. Like I was a package being delivered. Like I'd already been purchased and paid for. The lobby smelled like vanilla candles and disinfectant. Soft music played from hidden speakers. Everything designed to soothe, to pacify, to make resistance seem unreasonable. Residents sat in wingback chairs reading newspapers. Their clothes were clean, their hair was combed, their eyes were empty. "This is our main gathering area," the guide explained. "Social activities every afternoon. Bridge on Tuesdays. Bingo on Thursdays." I nodded, said it looked lovely, kept my real thoughts locked away. We walked down carpeted hallways past numbered doors. Each one identical, each one a cell disguised as comfort. The dining room sparkled under crystal chandeliers. Round tables set for 4. Fresh flowers in small vases. Chef-prepared meals, the guide continued. Special diets accommodated. No more worrying about grocery shopping or cooking. No more choosing what to eat. No more deciding when to be hungry. No more control over the small things that make life yours. But I kept nodding, kept smiling, kept playing the part they expected. Bethany squeezed my elbow as we walked. Her grip felt desperate, like she was trying to convince herself this was right. Lucas filmed everything on his phone. Evidence for later. Proof that he'd done his homework. Grant asked questions about medical care. About power of attorney procedures. About how quickly beds became available. Always about timing. Always about speed. Always about sealing the deal before anyone could object. The activities room showcased watercolor paintings taped to windows. Childish landscapes. Lopsided flowers. Art without risk or passion or truth. "We have creative programs," the guide announced proudly. Many residents discover talents they never knew they had. I'd taught watercolor for 20 years. I knew the difference between discovery and desperation. Between talent and killing time. These weren't discoveries, they were surrenders. We visited a model apartment next. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, kitchenette with 2 burners and a microwave. Everything you need, the guide promised. Compact, efficient, easy to maintain, easy to control, easy to monitor, easy to manage when independence becomes inconvenient. The windows faced the parking lot. No garden, no birds, no wind chimes hanging from the eaves. Just cars coming and going. Visitors arriving and leaving. Life happening somewhere else. I sat on the model bed. Tested the mattress. Opened the medicine cabinet. Looked inside the tiny closet. This could work, I told them. This could be comfortable. More lies. But necessary ones. Grant's smile grew wider. Bethany looked relieved. Lucas stopped filming and started calculating. On the drive back, they talked around me. About timing. About paperwork. About making this transition as smooth as possible. Smooth for whom? I wondered, but didn't ask. They dropped me at home with promises to call soon. To start the application process. To make everything official. I waved goodbye from my front porch. Watched them drive away. Waited until their taillights disappeared. Then I went inside and called Priya. She answered immediately, like she'd been waiting by the phone. I told her about the tour. About the model apartment. About the way they'd measured my life and found it wanting. She listened without judgment, without false comfort, with the patience lawyers learn when clients need to process betrayal. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she asked if I was ready. Ready for what came next. Ready for the fight. Ready to stop pretending. Yes, I told her. I'm ready. Tomorrow they would file papers. Tomorrow they would try to make their lies official. Tomorrow they would discover what happens when you underestimate a librarian. I spent the rest of the day preparing. Organizing documents. Checking account balances. Making sure every detail was perfect. Jonah had taught me that preparation beats panic every time. That careful planning trumps desperate measures. That patience wins wars even when it loses battles. I made dinner. Ate slowly. Tasted everything. This might be my last quiet evening for a while. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and judges and public accusations. Tomorrow would strip away the pretense of family love. But tonight, I was still in my own kitchen. Still cooking my own food. Still making my own choices. The phone rang twice. Bethany both times. I didn't answer. Whatever she needed to say could wait. I had more important things to do. I pulled out my photo albums. Flipped through decades of birthdays and holidays and ordinary moments. Here was Bethany at 5, gap-toothed and giggling. Lucas at 10, serious and careful. Grant nowhere to be seen because he hadn't mattered yet. When had it changed? When had love become calculation? When had concern become greed? I closed the albums. Put them back on their shelf. Some questions don't have answers worth finding. At 10 o'clock, I made hot chocolate. Added marshmallows like Jonah used to do. Sat in his chair by the window. The neighborhood was quiet. Porch lights glowing. Windows dark. Normal people living normal lives. Tomorrow I would join the abnormal. The contested. The fought over. The reduced to legal arguments and medical evaluations. But tonight, I was just a widow drinking cocoa. Missing her husband. Preparing for war. The marshmallows dissolved slowly. Sweet and soft and completely temporary. Like childhood. Like trust. Like the illusion that family means safety. I finished the cocoa. Washed the mug. Put it back where it belonged. Tomorrow would require all my strength. Tonight was for gathering it. The courthouse smelled like old paper and broken promises. I wore my navy suit. The one I'd bought for Jonah's funeral. The one that made me look smaller than I felt. Bethany sat 3 rows behind me. She wore her hospital scrubs. Her stethoscope draped around her neck like borrowed authority. Lucas checked his phone every 30 seconds. His leg bounced against the wooden bench. Nervous energy looking for escape. Grant wore his courtroom smile. The one he used when other people's lives hung in the balance. Priya sat beside me, calm as deep water. Her briefcase held weapons I couldn't see but trusted completely. Omar had set up his laptop near the back. Screens and cables turned him into a one-man war room. The judge entered at 9 sharp. Gray hair, steel glasses, eyes that had seen every lie families tell themselves. She called our case number. My name echoed through the courtroom. Evelyn Hart versus the people who raised me. Grant stood first. His voice was smooth as honey poured over broken glass. He spoke about beloved matriarchs. About safety concerns. About families who cared deeply for their vulnerable members. He produced the medical evaluation. Dr. Kessler's letterhead. Official stamps. Everything designed to look unquestionable. Moderate cognitive impairment, he read aloud. Unsafe living conditions. Immediate intervention required. I sat perfectly still, hands folded, breathing steady, letting his lies fill the air like smoke. The judge listened without expression. 30 years on the bench had taught her patience. When Grant finished, Priya rose like morning mist becoming storm clouds. She walked to the front of the courtroom, turned to face Grant, smiled once, sharp as winter. Authentication, she said simply. We question the document's authenticity. Omar's fingers danced across his keyboard. The wall screen came alive with codes and timestamps and digital fingerprints. The medical evaluation appeared in sections. Creation date, modification history, printer identification. Created on Mr. Cole's personal laptop, Omar announced. At 1:31 a.m. last Tuesday night. Printed on a Canon inkjet at his home address. Not at any medical facility. The notary's stamp belongs to Carla Mendoza, who moved to Arizona last year, whose commission expired 14 months ago. The courtroom fell silent. Grant's smile flickered like a candle in wind. Priya handed documents to the judge. Phone records. bank access logs, email timestamps showing unauthorized entry attempts. Plus this, she added, a recording of petitioners discussing their plan to list Mrs. Hart's house by June. My own voice filled the courtroom, clear and steady despite everything. I'm activating Jonah's continuity provisions, I heard myself say. Tell Omar to bring a storm jacket. The judge leaned forward. Her steel glasses caught the fluorescent light. Grant tried to recover. Began speaking about misunderstandings, about good intentions gone wrong, about family complications. The judge raised her hand. The universal gesture for silence. She asked me directly if I required a protective order. If I felt safe with these family members. I looked at Bethany, at Lucas, at the son-in-law who'd tried to steal my future. 3 faces I'd loved. 3 people who'd forgotten how to love me back. Yes, Your Honor, I said. I think I finally do. The gavel fell like thunder. Petition denied. Investigation ordered. Protective order granted. Grant went pale. Bethany started crying. Lucas stared at his phone like it held answers to questions he'd never learned to ask. Outside the courthouse, Priya walked me to her car. The sun felt different, sharper, like seeing clearly after years of fog. Omar packed his equipment with quiet satisfaction. Justice served through metadata and mouse clicks. I thanked them both for believing me, for fighting when I couldn't, for turning Jonah's careful plans into shields that actually worked. They drove away, leaving me alone on the courthouse steps. Alone but not abandoned, protected but not imprisoned. My phone buzzed. A text from Lucas. Just 2 words. I'm sorry. I stared at the message until the letters became shapes. Shapes became nothing. Delete. Not forever, but for now. The bus ride home took 20 minutes. I watched familiar neighborhoods pass by. Same houses, same trees, same mailboxes, but everything looked different now. Like I'd been given new eyes for an old world. At home, I made tea. Earl Grey, strong enough to wake the dead. I sat in Jonah's chair by the window. Opened the photo albums I'd closed last night. Here was Bethany learning to walk. Lucas riding his first bicycle. Family vacations to beaches where everyone smiled. When had it changed? When had love become math? When had concern become ownership? Maybe it happened slowly, one compromise at a time. One small betrayal leading to larger ones. Maybe it happened all at once. Some moment when they looked at me and saw $signs instead of their mother. Or maybe it had always been there. Waiting, growing quietly in the spaces between what we said and what we meant. I closed the albums. Put them away. Some puzzles don't need solving. The afternoon passed quietly. I read. I cooked. I answered emails from friends who'd heard about the hearing. Everyone wanted to know how I was feeling. How I was coping. Whether I needed anything. I told them I was fine. Which was true enough. Fine was better than destroyed. Fine was victory measured in small increments. Evening came with golden light and longer shadows. I made dinner for one. Ate slowly. Tasted everything. No one called. No one visited. No one tried to manage my evening routine. The silence felt strange at first. Then comfortable. Then precious. This was what I'd fought for. Not money. Not property. Not legal victories. Quiet. Choice. The right to eat soup when I wanted soup. To go to bed when I felt tired. To be Evelyn Hart in my own house on my own terms. At 10 o'clock, I locked the front door. Turned off the porch light. Checked the windows one last time. My house. My rules. My life. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Phone calls from reporters. Questions from neighbors. Decisions about what came next. But tonight, I was simply a widow getting ready for bed. In her own bedroom. In her own way. In her own time. I brushed my teeth. Washed my face. Put on pajamas Jonah had given me for our last Christmas together. In the bedroom mirror, I saw myself clearly. Not as others saw me. Not as I'd been seen in courtrooms and medical evaluations and family conferences. Just me, 66 years old, still standing, still deciding, still here. I turned off the light. Pulled the covers up to my chin. Listened to my house settling around me like a cat finding its favorite spot. Tomorrow the phone would ring. Tomorrow there would be consequences and complications and new storms to weather. But tonight, everything was exactly where it belonged. Including me. The phone started ringing at 7 in the morning. Reporters, neighbors, people who'd heard about the hearing. Everyone wanted to know how it felt to win. I unplugged the landline, put my cell phone in a drawer. Silence was more valuable than sympathy. The doorbell rang twice before noon. I didn't answer, didn't peek through the curtains, didn't need to see who wanted pieces of my story. By afternoon, the vultures moved on. Found fresher disasters to pick clean. I made coffee, sat in my kitchen, listened to my house breathe around me. The quiet felt different now. Not empty, not waiting, just peaceful. For 3 days, I lived like a hermit. Read books, cooked simple meals, slept without dreaming. On Thursday, Bethany came. I saw her through the window. Sitting in her car, not moving, just staring at my front door. She looked smaller somehow, deflated, like someone had let the air out of her certainty. She sat there for an hour, then drove away. Friday brought Lucas. He paced on my front porch, checked his phone, started toward the door 3 times, never knocked. Finally, he left an envelope under my welcome mat, drove away without looking back. Inside was a single sheet of paper. His handwriting, careful and childish like when he was 10. Mom, I'm sorry. I don't know how to fix this. I don't know if I can. No signature, no return address, no promises he couldn't keep. I folded the letter, put it in Jonah's desk drawer, next to other things too complicated to throw away. The weekend passed quietly. I baked bread, watered plants, organized closets that didn't need organizing. Normal activities, normal rhythms, the luxury of boring days. Monday brought Priya with legal updates. The district attorney was filing charges. Forgery, attempted financial exploitation, conspiracy. Grant would face trial. Lucas had immunity in exchange for testimony. Bethany might lose her nursing license. Consequences, finally. For people who thought consequences belonged to other families. I asked Priya what happened next. How long court cases took. Whether I'd have to testify. She explained procedures, timelines, the slow grinding of justice through bureaucratic machinery. Months, she said, maybe years. The law moves at its own pace. I had time. More time than I'd expected. Time to figure out what came after survival. Tuesday, I called the travel agent. Booked the Ireland trip Jonah had circled in guidebooks but never taken. 3 weeks. Small hotels, walking tours, places where no one knew my story. The agent asked if I was traveling alone. Her voice carried the pity people reserve for elderly widows. Yes, I told her. Completely alone, by choice. Wednesday brought a different kind of visitor. Dr. Kessler. He stood on my porch looking ashamed. His white coat replaced by civilian clothes. His confidence replaced by something that looked like remorse. I opened the door. Didn't invite him in. Didn't make it easy. He apologized for not catching the forgery sooner. For letting his name be used to hurt me. For failing to protect a patient's dignity. Better late than never, I thought. But didn't say. He offered to write letters, make statements, testify about proper medical evaluations versus criminal fabrications. I thanked him, told him to call Priya, closed the door gently but firmly. Forgiveness would come. Eventually. But not today. Thursday, I started packing for Ireland. Practical clothes. Comfortable shoes. Books I'd been meaning to read. The suitcase felt light. Like I was packing a different person's life. Someone who traveled alone. Someone who made her own choices. Someone who looked like me but felt brand new. Friday evening, Helen knocked. My neighbor. The one who'd watched everything unfold from across the street. She brought cookies. Homemade chocolate chip. Still warm from the oven. We sat on my front porch. Ate cookies. Watched the sun set behind familiar trees. She asked if I was okay. Really okay. Not just putting on a brave face. I considered the question seriously. Took inventory of my heart. My mind. My stubborn determination to keep existing. Yes, I told her. I think I really am. She nodded. Said she'd keep an eye on the house while I was traveling. Water plants. Collect mail. Make sure everything stayed exactly as I left it. Exactly as I left it. The promise every traveler needs to hear. Saturday, I cleaned house. Not because it was dirty. Because leaving requires order. Because coming home should feel like returning to yourself. I dusted Jonah's photograph. Straightened books on shelves. Put fresh sheets on a bed I wouldn't sleep in for 3 weeks. The house looked ready. Ready for absence. Ready for return. Ready for whatever came next. Sunday, I went to church. First time since the hearing. First time since becoming the woman who fought back. People stared. Some smiled. Others whispered behind prayer books. Everyone had opinions about my newfound reputation. I sat in my usual pew. Sang familiar hymns. Let the ritual wash over me like warm water. The sermon was about forgiveness. About turning the other cheek. About loving your enemies. I listened politely. Disagreed quietly. Some cheeks have been turned enough. After service, Mrs. Patterson approached. 83 years old. Sharp as winter wind. Mean as necessity. She told me I'd done right. That families need boundaries. That fighting back sometimes looks like love. Coming from her, this felt like absolution. Or at least permission to stop apologizing for surviving. Sunday evening, I packed the last items. Passport. Tickets. Medications in clearly labeled bottles. Everything a careful traveler needs. Everything an independent woman requires. My phone rang once. Bethany's number. I let it go to voicemail. Later, I listened to her message. She sounded different, smaller, sadder. She asked if we could talk when I got back from my trip. Somehow she knew about Ireland. Maybe Lucas told her. Maybe she'd been watching. Maybe guilt has its own intelligence network. I deleted the message. Not from anger. From exhaustion. Some conversations require more energy than I had. Tomorrow I would fly to Dublin. Walk along rivers where poets once dreamed. Eat meals no one else had chosen. Sleep in beds I'd selected myself. Tomorrow I would be a tourist in my own freedom. A traveler carrying only what she needed. Tonight, I was still Evelyn Hart. Still 66. Still standing in her own kitchen on her own terms. But tomorrow, I would be something else. Someone else. A woman whose story was just beginning. I made tea. Earl Grey. Strong enough for new adventures. Outside, night settled over my neighborhood. Familiar houses. Known streets. The geography of a life I'd fought to keep. Inside, I packed courage into carry-on luggage. Folded independence into a suitcase. Prepared for whatever came after winning. Tomorrow would bring airports and strangers and choices I'd never had to make alone. Tonight was for saying goodbye. To the woman I'd been. To the fight I'd won. To the life I'd saved from people who forgot how to love it. Tomorrow would bring everything else. Autumn came early that year. I returned from Ireland with soil under my fingernails and lightness in my chest. 3 weeks of walking. 3 weeks of choosing my own meals. 3 weeks of being nobody's mother. Just Evelyn. Tourist. Stranger. Free woman. The house welcomed me back with familiar creaks and settled silences. Mail stacked neatly by Helen. Plants still green. Everything exactly as I'd left it. Everything except me. The phone messages could wait. The legal updates could wait. The world could wait while I unpacked more than clothes. I'd brought back stones from Irish beaches. Postcards I'd never send. A confidence that fit like well-worn shoes. Tuesday brought news from Priya. Grant's trial was set for December. 3 months away. Time enough for lawyers to sharpen their knives. Lucas had given his deposition. 4 hours of testimony about forgery. About lies. About how greed made family members into strangers. Priya said he'd cried. During the deposition, when they asked him why he'd participated, I felt nothing when she told me this. Not satisfaction. Not pity. Just the hollow space where motherly concern used to live. Crying was cheaper than character. Tears cost less than truth. Wednesday, Omar stopped by with chocolate cake and digital updates. Grant's computer had yielded more secrets. More forged documents. More evidence of systematic theft. Not just from me. From other elderly clients. Other families who'd trusted him with their futures. A pattern. A business model built on exploitation. I wasn't his first victim. But I might be his last. Omar's evidence would help convict him. Send him to prison. Destroy his reputation. Make him a cautionary tale. Justice served with metadata and mouse clicks. Jonah would have appreciated the precision. Thursday brought unexpected visitors. 2 women I'd never seen. They stood on my porch holding flowers and nervous energy. Their introduction came in careful phrases. They were Grant's other victims. Their families had hired him. Trusted him. Lost everything. One was 81. The other 74. Both living in studio apartments now. Both learning to stretch Social Security over full-sized lives. But they weren't here for pity. They were here for strategy. My case had given them hope. My lawyer had given them direction. My victory had shown them possibilities. We sat in my living room. Drank tea from Jonah's good china. Talked about legal tactics and courtroom procedure. But mostly we talked about betrayal. About children who became strangers. About love that curdled into ownership. Mrs. Chen's son had emptied her investment accounts. Bought himself a boat. Called it family planning. Mrs. Rodriguez's daughter had sold her house. Put her in a facility. Spent the proceeds on kitchen renovations. Different details. Same story. Families who forgot the difference between caring for and cashing in. They left with Priya's phone number and something that looked like hope. Justice shared is justice multiplied. Friday evening, I was making dinner when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Bethany. She stood differently now, smaller, less certain, like someone who'd learned the weight of consequences. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. Some conversations require distance. She looked older, tired. Her nurse's confidence replaced by something that resembled humility. She told me she'd left Grant. Finally, after the hearing, after seeing what he'd tried to do to me, she was renting a room near the university, taking classes, ethics courses, trying to rebuild credibility she'd lost. She asked if we could talk. Really talk. About what had happened. About what came next. I told her maybe. Someday. When sorry became more than a word. She nodded. Said she understood. That she'd wait. However long it took. Then she walked away. No arguing. No pleading. No trying to manage my response. Progress. Small. But measurable. Saturday brought Lucas. Not to my door. To my mailbox. Another letter slipped inside without ceremony. His handwriting had improved. The words came easier. Like he'd been practicing honesty. He'd started therapy. Real therapy. With someone who specialized in financial abuse within families. He'd learned terms for what they'd done. Emotional coercion. Gaslighting. Elder abuse wrapped in concern. He was working to understand how love became control. How protection became theft. How family became crime. The letter was longer this time. More detailed. More honest about motives and methods. But still no promises. Still no timeline for forgiveness. Still just a son trying to become someone his mother might recognize. I folded the letter. Put it with the first one. Evidence of evolution. Proof that people could change direction. Whether they could change enough remained to be seen. Sunday, I went to church. The whispers had died down. The staring had mostly stopped. Scandal ages quickly in small communities. Mrs. Patterson sat beside me during service. She'd become my unofficial bodyguard, ready to silence gossip with sharp looks. After church, we walked to the cemetery. To Jonah's grave. I brought fresh flowers. She brought her flask. We sat on the stone bench he'd requested. Talked about weather and neighbors and the price of groceries. Normal things. Comfortable things. The luxury of boring conversation. She asked if I missed him more now. After everything. After proving I could fight alone. I considered the question. Missed him differently, I said. Not for protection. For companionship. For someone who understood my victories without explanation. She nodded. Took a small sip from her flask. Said widowhood was like learning a new language. Fluency took time. We sat in comfortable silence. Two old women who'd outlived their husbands and learned to speak for themselves. Sunday evening, I made pot roast. Jonah's favorite. Enough for one person but cooked with love for two. The kitchen filled with familiar smells. Comfort food for a comfort evening. The reward for surviving another week. I ate slowly. Tasted everything. Noticed flavors and textures and the simple pleasure of choosing my own portion size. No one commented on what I ate. How much. Whether it was healthy enough or social enough or appropriate for someone my age. Just me and my dinner and the quiet satisfaction of making my own choices. The phone rang once. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Later, I listened to the message. A reporter from the city newspaper. Working on a story about elder abuse. Wanting to interview the woman who fought back. I deleted the message. Some stories belong to the people who lived them. Not the ones who want to sell them. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. More legal meetings. More decisions about testimony and evidence. But tonight was mine. Earned through battle. Measured in small freedoms. Valued in quiet moments. I made tea. Read a book. Went to bed when I felt tired. Simple acts. Revolutionary in their ordinariness. The victory of living without permission. Outside, autumn wind moved through trees I'd fought to keep. Inside, I settled into sleep I'd earned the right to choose. Tomorrow would bring whatever it brought. Tonight belonged to me. Winter arrived like an old friend keeping promises. Snow covered the garden Jonah planted. Ice glazed the windows he'd cleaned every spring. Cold settled into spaces we'd warmed together. But the house held heat better now. Insulation I'd had installed. New furnace I'd chosen myself. Warmth paid for with money I'd protected. December brought Grant's trial like an early Christmas present wrapped in justice. I sat in the gallery wearing my best wool dress. Navy blue. Serious. The color of deep water and deeper determination. Bethany sat 3 rows behind me. She'd cut her hair. Lost weight. Looked like someone learning to live with consequences. Lucas sat with the prosecutors. Witness for the state. Former co-conspirator turned truth-teller. His testimony would help convict the man he'd once followed. Grant wore an expensive suit. Confident smile. The same charm that had fooled so many families. That had almost fooled mine. But courtrooms don't care about charm. They care about evidence. And Omar had provided plenty. Document after document. Screen capture after screen capture. A digital trail of lies so clear even judges could follow it. The forgery charges came first. Fake medical evaluations. Stolen letterhead. Signatures that looked official but felt criminal. Then financial exploitation. Unauthorized account access. Attempted property theft. Elder abuse dressed up as family concern. The jury listened with faces like stone. 12 people learning how greed disguises itself as love. Grant's lawyer tried desperate tactics. Character witnesses who praised his community service. Bank presidents who vouched for his professionalism. But fraud has its own character. Theft speaks its own language. And both were louder than false testimonials. On Thursday, the verdict came down like snow. Inevitable. Final. Beautiful in its completeness. Guilty on all charges. Maximum sentence. 7 years in prison. License revoked permanently. I felt nothing when they read it. No joy. No satisfaction. Just the quiet peace of a problem finally solved. Justice isn't revenge. It's restoration. Setting the world right after someone knocks it crooked. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited with cameras and questions. They wanted quotes about victory. Sound bites about fighting back. I walked past them without speaking. Some stories don't need commentary. Truth speaks for itself. Priya drove me home through streets that looked different in winter light. Familiar houses wearing snow like Sunday clothes. We didn't talk much. Shared victory needs no words. Sometimes silence says everything. At home, I made hot chocolate. Added marshmallows. Sat in Jonah's chair by the window. The neighborhood was quiet. Peaceful. Normal in the way I'd forgotten was possible. My phone buzzed. Text message from Mrs. Chen. 2 words. Thank you. Another message from Mrs. Rodriguez. Same sentiment. Different language. Same gratitude. Grant's conviction would help their cases. Give their lawyers ammunition. Turn their whispered accusations into courtroom victories. Ripples in a pond. One stone thrown. Many circles spreading. Friday brought Lucas to my door. First time since the hearing. First time since choosing sides. He looked different. Thinner. Older. Like someone who'd been carrying heavy stones and finally put them down. He asked if he could come in. Talk for a few minutes. Say things that needed saying. I let him into the hallway. Not the living room. Not yet. Some conversations require careful boundaries. He talked about therapy. About understanding. About learning the difference between helping and controlling. He'd gotten a new job. Honest work. Selling something that actually helped people instead of exploiting them. He was paying restitution. To me. To other families Grant had cheated. Money he didn't have going to people he'd helped hurt. It would take years. But he was committed to making things right. However long it took. I listened without interrupting. Without forgiving. Without promising anything except attention. When he finished, I told him to keep going. Keep working. Keep learning. Keep becoming someone I might recognize. But not yet. Not today. Recovery takes time. Trust takes longer. He nodded. Said he understood. Walked away without arguing or pleading or trying to manage my timeline. Progress. Small. But real. Saturday, I baked cookies. Molasses ones. Dark and rich and impossible to break. Jonah's favorites. The kitchen filled with familiar smells. Butter. Spice. The comfort of routine restored to rightful purpose. I packaged some for Helen. Some for Mrs. Patterson. Some for Priya and Omar. Gratitude measured in sugar and flour. The rest I kept for myself. Selfish pleasure. Sweet rebellion against anyone who thought I shouldn't enjoy dessert. Sunday brought Bethany. Not to my door. To my mailbox. An envelope with her careful handwriting. Inside was a letter. Long, detailed, honest in ways that hurt to read. She'd left nursing temporarily, enrolled in ethics courses, started therapy with someone who specialized in family manipulation. She was learning terms for what she'd done. Emotional abuse, financial coercion, elder exploitation disguised as concern. She was working to understand how protection became control, how love became ownership, how daughter became enemy. The letter asked for nothing, promised nothing, just documented a journey from blindness to sight. At the end, a single line. I don't know if I can earn your forgiveness, but I'm going to try. I folded the letter, put it with Lucas's growing collection. Evidence of evolution. Proof that people could change direction. Whether they could change enough remained an open question. Sunday evening, I opened Jonah's barometer journal. His careful handwriting filled pages with observations about weather and pressure and when storms might turn. I added my own entry. First time since he died. First time since learning to read my own weather. Storm past, I wrote. Pressure steady. Forecast improving. Then I closed the book. Put it back on its shelf. Some measurements need time to prove accurate. The phone rang once. Unknown number. I answered this time. A woman's voice. Elderly. Nervous. She'd heard about my case. About fighting back. About winning. Her family was trying to put her in a home. Sell her house. Take control of her money. The same story with different names. She wanted to know how I'd done it. How I'd prepared. How I'd fought. I talked to her for an hour. Gave her Priya's number. Omar's contact information. The tools she needed to build her own defenses. Another ripple. Another stone thrown. Another woman learning she didn't have to surrender. After I hung up, I sat in my quiet kitchen. Made tea. Watched snow fall outside my windows. The forecast was long. The barometer read steady, and the house was exactly where it belonged. Full of choices I'd made. Warmth I'd chosen. Light I'd decided to let in. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. More families needing help. More storms to weather. But tonight was mine. Earned through battle. Measured in small freedoms. Valued in quiet moments. I turned off the lights. Locked the doors. Went to bed when I felt ready. Simple acts. Revolutionary in their ordinariness. The victory of living without asking permission. Outside, winter settled over the neighborhood like a blanket. Inside, I settled into dreams I'd earned the right to choose. The long forecast looked promising. The storm had passed, and I was still here. Still standing, still choosing, still home.